Hi, Elaine. I'm excited about doing an oral history today with you. Today's August 23rd, 2019, and I'm Martha Baker, and this is East Ridge Rec Center in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. So let's begin your story today.
Okay, like you said, my name is Elaine Safe. That's S-A-F-E, just like it sounds. And I'm here to tell you the story of my family coming to Denver in the early years.
So can you tell me the name of your great-grandfather who was a pioneer to Denver?
His name was John Johnson Epley. And he originally was born in Ohio, but as a young boy he moved to Iowa. And there he engaged in brick making. I assume he had a brickyard, but he did brick making, real estate, and contracting work, and made a moderate fortune. So in 1872, he came to Denver. Why Denver? Because Denver had a thirst for bricks. And so he opened up the Epley Brickyard in West Denver.
Do you know why he chose the location where the brickyard is?
I believe he probably chose the location because it had railroad running right through the property, so he could bring in supplies to make the brick and also to distribute the brick going out.
So he was very successful. Did he, excuse me.
Well, he was successful for a while, but the panic, the economic panic of 1873, just after he got here, came, and he had ruined, lost everything. Well, he did not lose the property, but it was rack and ruin.
So where did he go?
Well, the silver boom was happening in Silverton and Durango area. And so he went to build smelters for the silver, the reduction of ores for silver. So around 1873-74, he, of course, had a partner in this, a man by the name of Green with an E on the end. But they loaded up wagons, and in the wagons they had men, they had supplies, they had everything to begin a new industry in Silverton and Durango area.
So after he built the smelter and they refined the silver, how did the silver end up? What?
Well, of course, they had a lot of pitfalls because nothing goes smoothly. But once they got the silver smelter up and running, then they came out with pure silver, a bullion of pure silver, which they made into bricks. And then they shipped the silver bricks out of Durango area.
Back to Denver.
Back to Denver.
Okay, so then after a while, he ended up leaving there, right?
He left that adventure and he came back to his brick making which was still going on, by the way. The brickyard was still functioning and producing bricks. And it was just a few short years later that he opened up the first glass works in Denver, the very first glass works.
And he started with glass because didn't they need to get equipment for that too?
Oh yes, they had to ship special equipment in for that. He built a big building, which I have a picture of. It's in the Western history of the Denver Library, Denver Public Library.
So he had all the materials that he needed here, didn't he, for glass?
That's why he decided to go into the glass making, because All the materials were here, the silica, the alkalines, everything that goes into making glass were readily available in the area. So they just needed the machinery and buildings and men.
So they made bottles, didn't they?
They made bottles. Unfortunately, I don't have a single one.
Oh, wow. That's so cool, though. So he met a beautiful woman. So tell me about your great-grandmother.
Well, he was already married in Iowa when he came to Denver. And her name was Armenia Elizabeth. Armenia, it's an unusual name.
Armenia.
Right.
Okay.
She was a very interesting woman, too. She was a divine scientist of the Divine Science Church. And they both built a chapel in Denver, just a few blocks from their home.
Now, they built a mansion in Denver?
I don't know if they built the mansion or it was already there. That I'm unsure of. But it was a big place. It was had 6 living rooms on the first floor, and of course a kitchen, pantry, and china, a room for china. And it had parlor and dining room, just a big place. 2 bedrooms on the first floor and a bathroom. The upper floor contained nothing but bedrooms and a sleeping porch, where I'm assuming that they went in the summertime to sleep because they didn't have any cooling apparatus.
So I understand their house was located on Howard Place?
It was on 2839 Howard Place, and sometimes it was referred to as 2839 Brick Road because it ran at the far end of the property of the brickyard. Also, there was a huge barn on the property and had 16 stalls. And the funny thing is, they were all underground stalls for the horses. But it's interesting to note that the Barnum and Bailey Circus, when it came to Denver, they housed their animals in the barn.
So the circus stayed on your great-grandfather's property?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. It was a large area, wasn't it?
It was a large area, and he also had other rental properties by the house, the mansion on the house.
Did they have some difficulties with water or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, the Denver water main broke twice on their property, flooded the brick, and I have an excellent picture of the flooding of the property and the brick.
So then he continued to do the glass, and they had a family. So then that would have been your grandfather.
My grandfather, Paul T. Epley. Mm-hmm.
And so tell me a little bit about Paul T.
Well, he worked at the brickyard, of course, when he was a young man, and he also was a fireman, early Denver fireman.
And you have a photo of that.
I have a great photo of that.
Oh, good, good. So Paul T. Was, it looks like he was born in 1878, and when he was in Denver, he married a nice lady that was your grandmother,
Bertha Epley.
Bertha Epley.
Well, her maiden name was Sipe.
Can you spell it?
S-E-I-P-P.
Okay. And then, did they live in the mansion?
No,
No.
they never did, as far as I know.
Okay. And then they had a few children?
Yeah, like 9.
9.
9 children, and my dad was the 4th child born, Walter Epley.
Walter Epley
Mhm.
is your dad. So he was born in the early part of the century?
He was born 1909.
Okay. And then I'm sure you have some great stories about Walter Epley.
Yeah, my dad was a great guy. He, in Denver at that time when he was a young man, they had what they called the Golden Gloves boxing. And they had it every week, as far as I can tell, at the City Auditorium, which had just been built. And he and his two brothers, they were all little fighters, Golden Glove fighters, welterweight. And when they would schedule a fight for the weekend, they didn't know which one of these Epleys could go to the fight. So they billed him as Kid Epley. And never knew which one was going to show up, but one of them did.
So your dad had two brothers?
He had two brothers and 6 sisters.
So all 3 brothers. Do you know the names of the other brothers that were fighters?
Jay and John. John Jay, who was named after their grandfather, John Johnson Epley. Yeah.
And did they win?
Some. Some they lost because I have records of losing about, yeah.
So they were actually Golden Glove fighters.
It was
Denver.
a big thing in Denver.
Wow.
It was.
Did so now your dad's up in his high school years and later. So
and later,
I'm sure
and he meets my mother then, Marguerite Halverson. She also was on the west side of Denver. They went to West High, both of them.
I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, to spell your grandmother's name, your mother's name, sorry.
Marguerite Halverson, M-A-R-G-U-E-R-I-T-E, and Halverson is H-A-L-V-E-R-S-O-N.
Okay.
When early years, when they were starting to take an interest in each other, Mom didn't want to meet my dad on the street, so if she saw him coming with his friend, she'd walk over the other side of the street and avoid him. But they married in 1935, and then I was born in 1937. I'm the oldest of 5.
Can you tell me the story again about why they didn't announce their marriage?
Well, it was the Depression, the tail end of the Depression, and Mom had a job at a patent attorney in downtown Denver, and Dad had a job with a paper company. And it wasn't a law, but it was kind of an unsaid thing that 2 people in a family didn't have a job during the Depression. Only one. But Dad was supporting his family at the time, his brothers and sisters, his siblings. So his income was going there, and Mom was bringing income in for them. So.
Because his father couldn't work. So you are the firstborn of how many children?
5 children.
5 children.
And we lived on South Downing Street. In a little brick bungalow. It had to be brick, right?
Yes. So you live near Wash Park?
We lived close to Wash Park on South Downing. And the school years in World War II was on.
So how did you get to school? Did you walk to school?
I walked to school, but during that time, I have to tell you, everybody had a coal furnace in Denver, or if they were lucky, they had hot water heat. But the coal furnaces, in the wintertime especially, put all these cinders and black smoke in the air, and I was forever getting a cinder in my eye. Would run home from school and run in the bathroom, and Mom kept a little glass in the bathroom, you'd fill it up with water and try to wash out your eye to get rid of the cinders.
Like having sand in your eye.
It was like having sand in your eye, yeah. It wasn't until after the war that furnaces began to be converted to gas, or brand new furnaces brought in. But most people had a coal furnace.
So the World War II had started, and how did that affect the people in Denver?
Oh, we were all very resourceful. Even as a young child, we were very resourceful. We all had victory gardens in the yard. Everyone would go by and say, "How's your victory garden doing?" And at school, I was in grade school. At school, we had paper drives all the time. We also brought balls of rubber bands all balled up, and balls of string, and tin foil. Tin foil was on chewing gum. And the tin foil, you saved that tin foil when you unwrapped your gum and tried to make a ball out of it to bring to the next drive.
Were there things that you couldn't buy?
Oh, yeah. Everything was rationed because we had ration books. Gasoline, you couldn't buy tires for your car hardly. Of course, the coffee, sugar, all the good staples, it was all rationed.
Did you tell me you saved your grease?
Mom and all the housewives that I knew, they saved every drop of grease. It didn't matter what it came from, pork, beef, whatever. You saved your grease and poured it in a can and took it to the grocery store. Now, I think they paid you 2 cents a pound for it. But the grease was for the war effort.
Oh, wow. Did people have animals in their yards? Were you allowed to have?
You could have rabbits and chickens, and in your own backyard. Imagine that in Denver proper, that you could have your chickens and rabbits during the war years.
So you could have eggs.
Mm-hmm. Well, also rabbits were for eating as well as the chickens.
You said that Gates Rubber was already there in Denver.
Right. And somehow, even though they were deeply involved in the war effort, somehow we got Gates Rubber balls. And I know it was in my grade school years, and that would have been the war years. But oh, what a delight if you could get a Gates Rubber ball. They were only about so big, but they were a great rubber ball, and I still got mine.
Oh, wow. I bet they bounced.
They bounced high.
So, during the war, did you have television?
Oh, of course not.
No.
But we had the radio. We liked to listen to the radio, and it was always about the war effort and how the war was progressing. And of course, in those days, they all advertised the cigarettes. You know, Lucky Strike, Camel, Philip Morris. I can't think of any more, but a lot of brands of cigarettes. And always at the end of a broadcast, if they were advertising a cigarette, they would announce how many cigarettes were being shipped to the boys overseas. We shipped 54 cartons of Lucky Strikes over to the boys overseas. And it was kind of a competition between the cigarette companies, I think, to see who could ship the most.
Oh, for the morale of the
For
men.
the morale of the guys,
Wow.
yeah.
So,
We really all came together during the war.
so when you went to high school, did you go get by car? How did you get to high school?
We made great use of the streetcars and the tramway buses. Streetcars, of course, ran on all the tracks in Denver, but the tramway buses, they were electric, and they could only go where the lines took them. every time we turned a corner on the bus, the apparatus would fall off. And the bus driver would have to get out, run around the back, and try to feed it back on the line. And it wasn't just turning the corner. Sometimes ornery boys came and unplugged us from the line.
Lots of sitting on the bus or the trolley, waiting for that to get fixed.
Get hooked back up so you could go.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think we had them very long.
no.
Maybe 8 years, 9 years, something like that.
So during your childhood, did you have any activities? Did you learn to dance? What about those kinds of things?
I did take dancing for about 15 years from Lillian Cavillo. At that time, that was the forerunner of the Colorado Concert Ballet. But yeah, and 1 year I did teach for Lillian Cavillo, the young ones,
Wow.
5-year-olds.
Were there any things in Denver, unique to Denver, that you did as a child, places you went? I know there were some great buildings here and some wonderful stores.
Well, a few years or in my high school years, my dad opened up his own paper company down at 1816 Market. Now this is right in back of the old Windsor Hotel, which in its day was a beautiful hotel. It's where Baby Doe Tabor and Horace Tabor resided in the first years of their marriage. But my dad's place in the bottom, in the basement, under the basement was a sealed up tunnel that had led from Union Station to the Windsor Hotel. Now why, you ask?
Yeah.
Why did they have this tunnel running from Union Station to the hotel? I can only surmise it was for gentlemen to get off the train and travel to the hotel without being known.
So they had something probably like a brothel in the Windsor.
Maybe.
Yes. Okay.
Because over time, the Windsor Hotel did become derelict, and that's why it was finally torn down. It's a shame. It was a beautiful place.
So when your father had the Western Paper Company, I'm guessing that you helped.
I did. It was my job when he had railroad tracks that came right in front of the property on Market Street. And when he got a shipment of his paper goods in, they just dropped off a boxcar right in front of his place. And so he'd say, "Elaine, it's time, we're going down to unload." He always saved that for Saturday, usually. And so we'd unload the boxcar. I didn't do it by myself, but I helped unload the boxcar. And then there was a transom right in front of the building. You opened up the transom and there was a chute, and you just shot the paper goods down into the basement, and somebody took care of them from there.
So he supplied restaurants and stores?
He supplied restaurants, stores, anybody who had needs of paper goods, paper cups, paper plates, restaurant goods, glassware, silverware, cleaning supplies. That was also my job, to clean the place on Saturdays.
Nice. Was there anything else besides the tunnel in the basement?
They also housed, it was boarded up, but the old artesian well to feed the Windsor Hotel.
Was in the basement of your dad's store. Did
It's now a parking lot for the stadium.
oh, really?
Oh. It's all torn down.
Wow. So when you went shopping, what stores were there then?
Oh, well, the only place to go shopping was, of course, downtown Denver. all the grand stores. Daniels and Fisher's was at the far end. We had the Denver Dry and the May Company. That's where you went, downtown, you do your shopping. Daniels and Fisher's was a gorgeous store.
When Daniels and Fisher, they were famous for some man that worked there.
They had a doorman. He was over 7 foot tall. His name was Carl Sanderson. He was always there dressed beautifully as a doorman, and he was there to help you with your packages, help you in, open the door. Grand style.
Did they deliver?
All the
your goods?
department stores delivered. And if we would go shopping, of course my mom always took us to all the sales that were going on, but when we would go shopping, we would go to several stores and have them delivered, and sometimes the delivery beat us home.
Customer service.
Customer service.
So when you shopped down at Daniels and Fisher, was the tower there then?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And so you went in was that for touring?
Not at that time,
No.
but I don't remember going into the tower really.
But you recognize that building?
But you could always recognize the building. The Daniels and Fisher's Tower was your point in Denver. It was the point you oriented yourself. Now you can barely see it because the buildings are so tall now.
Now you mentioned the Tabors, and you said Baby Doe Tabor and Horace Tabor. Didn't they have a building, and were you there?
Oh, the Tabor Theater. Oh yeah, that was a grand theater, and it's a shame that it's gone too. Beautiful, beautiful. It was a big to-do, and they tried to save it, but
So it had like a stage and some music.
balconies and grand organ. When you went to the theater, the movie theater, the big theaters all had grand orchestras, organs.
Like big as a wall?
Like in a church, a big organ,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
with pipes, yeah. And you always heard the organ music.
So did you tell me that you lived by the doorman, that he was a neighbor?
Yes, he lived a block down from us, and this tall man, he always was a sight to see because at that time 7 foot tall was, I think he was 7'3". Was something to see. And of course he had a big Saint Bernard dog, which was a big tall man like that would have a big Saint Bernard dog. Yeah, he lived a block away.
So after you were a ballerina, and then later on, you worked at Molly Brown's house?
Oh, I just did fashion shows at Molly Brown House. We would have groups come in, and I think it was for fundraisers for the Molly Brown House, and we would dress up in the old clothes and show them off. It was fun.
And you have something that was Molly Brown's.
I do. I have a rocking chair from the Molly Brown House that I got from my husband's great aunt. She got it at auction when they disassembled the Molly Brown House. And it is one of those things that I want to give back to the Molly Brown House.
I'm sure they would like that. So now you are teenager and finished high school. Then what happened?
Well, I went off to college for 1 year. It was Colorado A&M, now Colorado State University, but it was A&M in those days. And after my first year of college, I worked at Elitch Gardens in the office. which was a grand place to work because it was so interesting in the office.
That Elitch is not the Elitch we have now.
No, no, the old Elitch Gardens on Tennyson, 58th, I think, in Tennyson. Beautiful gardens. It was a beautiful place. And they had the old Trocadero ballroom and the theater. The theater was a shame that's not there anymore. But they had grand names come into the theater. Frederick March, Princess, what's her name? Princess
Grace of Monaco?
Grace of Monaco. Yeah,
Yeah.
Grace Kelly, yeah.
So you worked there and set things up for...
I got to book the bands in, the big time bands they had to the Trocadero. That was always fun, yeah.
So it was a gardens and a zoo and a rides?
It was a zoo
Marathon.
in the early years, not in the 50s when I worked there. But the gardens, oh yes, they were grand.
So you went back to college after you got all the money that year?
Not quite. I got married. I met an Air Force wonderful man, and we got married and raised a family.
So you had 3 children.
Brian, Scott, and Mindy.
What year were you married to Edward?
1956. 1956.
Okay.
And then he passed away in 1967. And then I met another widower, Paul Safe, and we were married in 1968.
1968. Okay. And then you added to your family?
One more child.
Okay.
One more child. So we ended up with a family of 4 children.
Okay. So how did you meet Paul Safe?
In a bowling alley.
Okay.
My parents had taken me to a bowling alley because they were on a lake and they wanted to get me out of the house. So, yeah. And he was bowling.
So, and you met a wonderful man.
I
You
did.
married a wonderful man. So, tell me just briefly about your 4 children. They've all done well?
They've all done well. They've all gone to Colorado schools, Colorado colleges and universities. I think I had 1 child in each: Colorado School of Mines, CU, CSU, Gunnison.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the youngest is, what does he do?
He's a deputy sheriff for Jefferson County. And my other son is in computer technology. He's living in California. And my daughter's a dental hygienist.
Okay. So they have all done well. So do you have some more stories that you can think about right now?
Oh, I can go back to the war years.
Okay.
My dad was ready to be called up for the war. Of course, he had a family. So he kept his job at the paper company, but he worked at Cabusco, which was a munitions plant that maybe many people don't know we had here in Denver. It was right on the Federal Center. So he worked there at night at the Cabusco. And he also was an auxiliary policeman. Now, an auxiliary policeman during the war years was somebody who monitored the neighborhood. They monitored for blackouts. You didn't have any light peeking through.
So
yeah.
he walked around the neighborhood at night and checked for light.
If we were having a blackout.
And so that was, he did not have to go
He did not go to the
overseas
war.
because he was making munitions. So did he have special privileges like gas?
He had, well, he always had to get to the Federal Center, so I'm assuming, and he drove his car, so I'm assuming he had special privileges for gas and maybe tires.
So it really helped our war effort then.
Oh, yeah.
So after the war, things improved in Denver?
I remember when the war ended, everybody ran out to their, and jumped in their cars and just honked the horn, just sat and honked the horn, because it was such a wonderful, wonderful event in the world's life.
Mm-hmm. So, well, you have shared some great stories with us, and maybe we will have a chance to add to this someday for all the things that you experienced and having pioneers to Denver.
Mm-hmm.
As
I would like to say one thing off record maybe. I would advise everyone to write short little stories about yourself and what you did when you were young and your growing up years. Because I never asked my grandparents or my parents anything about the past. And this is all the stories that I do have about my grandparents have all been pieced together through books, the internet, because I did not ask about them.
you did have a grandmother that you said was German descent and made great desserts?
Oh yeah, she sauerbraten.
Ooh.
Yeah,
And some Swedish?
and the Swedish side is my mother's side. Yeah.
Okay. And so the Epley is German?
The Epley is basically German.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Elaine. This has been wonderful talking to you today.